بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. Durkheim, Emile Durkheim, 1859-1917, a major sociologist, in fact one of the founding fathers of sociology. Despite dying from a stroke at the young age of 59, Durkheim produced a number of major studies that rightly establish him with Karl Marx and Max Weber as one of the three founders of modern sociology. Founding father sometime. Like the others, he produced pioneering studies of substantive sociological topics, mostly concerned with the novel characteristic of modern industrial societies. So sociology is basically a discipline which studies modern societies, modernity, and justifies them basically, and contributed to, in this sense, sociology didn't exist before modernity, and won't exist after modernity, and contributed to debates about the appropriate methods for sociological studies, which is generally, applying scientific and pseudoscientific methods to the study of societies and individuals, etc. In his doctoral thesis, published as the Division of Labor and Society in 1893, Durkheim presented his contrast between the basis of social cohesion and primitive. So, when you are talking about modernity and trying to justify modernity, then obviously contrasting them with pre-modern societies and highlighting their differences and commonalities, important aspect. And obviously modernity, especially in the 19th century, was still not universal. So contrasting with existing non-modern societies was also important. Okay, so Durkheim presented contrast between the basis of social cohesion in pre-modern and modern societies, rather confusingly, because it suggests that machines characteristics of the industrial societies. Rather confusingly, he used term mechanical solidarity to describe the basis of social solidarity in primitive society. Yeah, and it is confusing because it suggests the machine characteristics of the industrial society, which obviously didn't exist in pre-modern societies. So mechanical solidarity for him is the type of solidarity which exists in of pre-modern societies. We have a separate video on the contrasts, so we will not dwell too much on it here, but I'll just provide the link to that video with this video in the description, so you can follow it if you want. Okay, so he used the term mechanistic solidarity to describe the basis of social solidarity in primitive societies. And obviously, primitive societies, this description itself is normative in the sense that normative, and it has a negative connotation, as if modern societies are advanced societies in every aspect, socially, morally, technologically, at least technologically. And by technology, we don't just mean physical technologies, but also conceptual technologies, ideas. So primitive societies where individuals and institutions were little differentiated, and people hung together by the common adherence to a shared body of value. A shared body of value and system. So there was much more cohesion and much more little differentiation. As you know, Habermas picks up on this, and through his conception of decentration and applying it to all sorts of things like language, interactions, etc. He differentiates between modern societies and primitive societies. And differentiation is connected to rise of individual consciousness, and also enhanced reflectiveness towards itself and others. So the social solidarity in primitive society, where individuals and institutions were little differentiated and people hung together by their common adherence to a shared body of values and symbols. So one thing which according to Durkheim and other sociologists like him differentiates modern society from pre-modern society is the modern society is the pre-modern, according to these people, pre-modern societies are holistic in the sense that everyone thinks according to given patterns and in terms of the given values, etc. And there's not much difference between people, their thinking and the way they act, and there's not much individualism and self-reflections, etc., which are all the characteristics of modern society. But obviously this is a caricature basically, and it's an exaggerated view of the differences. And also it confuses factual differences with normative differences. Just because certain societies don't recognize certain certain differences as normative doesn't mean that they don't exist factually. So this is and it's already presupposes the superiority of modernity. So it's not really a description, it's evaluation and a judgment at the same time. Yeah. Put simply, the society stayed together because its component people were very similar. very similar in having socialized into a single culture. In fact, it is ironic because modern societies are the highly monolithic societies in a way, in which no previous society was monolithic. Through centralized or semi-centralized education systems, media, etc., and globalization, there's much less substantial differences or meaningful differences in modern societies than in pre-modern societies. But sociologists, obviously, as I said, they weren't describing. They weren't merely describing the difference between the modern and pre-modern societies, but they were also justifying the superiority of modern societies over traditional societies. And in their defense in 19th century, obviously, modern societies themselves were not monolithic. And this is the thing. The thing is, when a new way of life, people call it civilization, you can call it whatever you want. And civilizational changes occur. And these don't happen every day. They happen like in 1,000 years or hundreds of years, once in a 1,000-year changes. And those are civilizational changes. At the start, there's a lot of freedom towards existing system. Because people are, or some people are rising against the existing systems, and they are getting traction. So in their eyes, the existing system is monolithic in the sense that it doesn't have space for another system. And no system has space for another system in that sense, especially not universal, the system claiming universality, etc. So in that sense, it's natural for people who are reacting against established societies and civilization to feel that they don't have a room for difference, etc. So this is the level of or phase of negative freedom, in the sense that we are talking about freedom against a system which seems to you monolithic, in the sense that it's not really monolithic, but it doesn't have a room for your source of idea. And now, but once you defeat that existing system and positively establish a new society, new values, etc., then as they establish, they are going to become norms. And when they become norms, even if those norms are based on difference and reflection, etc., they establish their own hegemony, they establish their own singularity, etc. Every system does that. But the irony, and in that sense, we can, but as the system grows, this nested system, the space to react against that system become less and less, and it in many ways it becomes like a system which it replaces, that it doesn't have much difference. It's in the eyes of those who are now trying to overcome this system, for example. Yeah, so that thing should be kept in mind. So where were we? So what I was saying was, in a way, in the defense of the sociology, they were writing in 19th century. So modernity still was establishing itself and rising, and had not fully universalized itself even in its core societies. So there is some justification for what they were saying, but not in a way which makes what they were saying factually true. Okay. Modern industrials are too large and complex to cohere by similarity. In fact, that very thing necessitates similarity because they are too large and complex. If they are like, that's also so modern society might be too large. I mean, in terms of population, they are. Although in fact, core modern societies are not that large. If you take out, China and America, and they are complex. Okay, they are complex. But that doesn't mean that all the societies weren't complex. But anyway, the very fact that they're large and complex actually requires similarity. Now, how do they impose similarity? That's difference. What are the mechanisms? There are different mechanism of imposing similarities over complexity and difference and plurality. Is a different question, and that obviously hides the fact that those singularity is being imposed, because it needs to hide, because the very essence of civilization, or the very core of civilization, is its claim to freedom and plurality, etc. Non-similarity in that sense. So it constantly needs to exaggerate its differences and underplay its similarities. The increased specialization of work and the differentiation of institution encourage diversity, okay, and individualism. But it also imposes through those very mechanisms, singularity, and there is individualism, but that individual but that individual is individuated within the larger context of very intensive socialization. Okay, I think we'll stop here and we'll continue with this century. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين آمين يا رب.